Hey, welcome back to Jetlag, the podcast all about TCKs and what it's like to grow up overseas. I'm your host, Noah, and today I'm joined by guest Silas. This is our third episode about a country, and today we're going to talk about Tanzania. So Silas, where is Tanzania?
So Tanzania is located in Eastern Africa. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah?
What are some general misconceptions that people have about Tanzania, or where Tanzania is located, or stuff like that?
So when you say, do you mean Tanzania or Africa in general?
I would say maybe Africa and then Tanzania.
Okay.
So you can go both.
One thing that I get a lot is Africa is a continent. It is not a country. Just want to make that clear. Tanzania itself, a lot of times when people think of Africa, they think a lot about war, about it being like a war-torn continent. Tanzania itself is actually very peaceful.
Okay.
There haven't been that many wars like there have in Sudan and other places like that. And also another big thing with Africa is it is still very, I wouldn't say tribal, but oriented around tribe-related stuff. So in Tanzania itself, there is no such thing as Tanzanian culture.
Okay.
There's Swahili-speaking culture, which is the main language in Tanzania.
Okay.
And there is tribal culture within the how many ever tribes there are in Tanzania.
Okay, so is Swahili is the language of...
Swahili is the national language in Tanzania.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's a pretty popular language across Africa,
Uh,
or is it just general in Tanzania?
It is the national language in Tanzania, and it's spoken in Kenya, as well as Rwanda, less so, some parts of Uganda. So in Eastern Africa, sort of.
Okay, cool.
It's the idea of it was spoken on the eastern coast, right on the coast in Tanzania and Kenya, and Arabic traders originally came in for trade, and they learned that language, and they used that as they went in, and the natives learned it to be able to trade.
Yeah, that's cool. What are some misunderstandings that you had personally about Tanzania, or that you shared with your family or friends?
So I grew up in Tanzania. So even I can't remember the states before we left for Tanzania. We left the U.S. to move to Tanzania when I was 1.
Okay.
I pretty much grew up there with the culture.
Okay.
I did have a lot of moments of misunderstanding when I came back to the U.S.
Okay. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have a lot of misunderstandings with other Americans or with Americans whenever we go back. Because I was more influenced by my local culture than I was by my passport country.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because I've spent most of my life in Tanzania, and now we're living here. Yeah, even though I looked different comparatively to other Tanzanians, I blend in pretty well culturally as well as language-wise.
Yeah, okay. So you talked a little about culture. So what is the Tanzanian culture like?
So like I said before, there is no Tanzanian culture. We were located with the Sukuma tribe, which is the largest tribe in Tanzania. There are plenty of different tribes, like the Wahia, the Wagogo, the Wachaga, the Waha, the Wamasai, and the Wasukuma are just a few.
Okay.
It's really oriented. You can have a tribal culture, which is based a lot around what they do for their living.
Okay.
And that influences a lot of how they talk. So, for instance, the Wasukuma are a lot of farmers and animal breeders, as well as they have their herds of cattle and stuff. So they are a lot more relaxed, less time oriented or things oriented, more oriented around people and friendships. Whereas, for instance, the Wachaga, the tribal stereotype of them would be that they are more business type oriented, because very business savvy. They're more direct. They care more about business deals, that type of thing. Okay. So, yeah.
And where y'all lived, was it in a city, or was it in, would you say the countryside?
So we were an hour's drive outside of the second largest city in Tanzania, which wasn't actually that big.
Okay.
So we were located in a fishing village right next to Lake Victoria. I'd say the village was probably 300 people.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty much where I grew up. Swahili pretty much 24/7.
Cool. So what was the food like? So you said you lived in a fishing village. Was there a lot of fish and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So fish is very, especially for the Sukuma around Lake Victoria, that's a very big part of the diet. And across Tanzania, we have rice is a main staple, as well as something called ugali. Ugali, they'll boil water
Okay.
and they'll mix in like corn flour. And the idea is they'll mix it in and they'll cook it until most of the water either evaporates till it's about the consistency of Play-Doh.
Okay.
And then you'll eat it with your hands, either with greens or with other meat.
Okay.
And normally the meat will have some kind of juice. Normally it's fish.
Okay, cool.
To do with the lake, yeah.
What do you miss about Tanzania? Or what are some things that you miss about it?
I miss a lot, especially with the Sukuma where we were, how everything is friendship driven. And friendship focused, relationship wise, like everything is about relationships or with people. So you could say with a friend, all right, I'll be over at your place at 4:00.
Mm-hmm.
That could mean you'd be over at their place at 5:00 until 10:00 at night, because you'd be walking and you'd meet somebody and you talk with them for an hour, and you know wherever they're going, the person they're going to visit it has the same thing. Because they know they're going to be late. So it's really not focused around time like the West is, really. Okay. It's focused around people.
That's really cool. So you were talking about how it was relational oriented, right? And with people. So do you guys, or do you and your family still keep up with your friends from Tanzania?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Actually, just yesterday, I had a video call with one of my friends in Tanzania.
That's awesome. That's cool.
And we were able to talk with his entire family. Because
that's
his mom was making their noonday meal, and he was just like, Mom, do you want to, or Mother, would you like to say hello to Mother Silas, or Mama Sila, or my mother?
That's really cool.
So we were able to talk over that, and my dad stays in contact with a lot of the people that he worked with over there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any like funny stories that, I don't know, like whether in Tanzania or like cross-cultural experiences, I guess in America, about culture shock or whatever, that, do you have any funny stories about that?
Yeah, I do have a couple.
Okay.
I think, so we left Tanzania when I turned 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I had lived in Tanzania for most of my entire life at that point. We'd been there, I was almost 14, so we'd been there for about 12 and a half years at that point.
Did y'all ever like go back to America, or did you just stay in Tanzania for like 12 straight years?
We went back 3 times over the 12 years, like every 3 years or so.
Okay, cool.
We'd go back for 5-ish months.
Okay.
To see family and stuff like that. Normally it was during the summertime.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so coming back to the U.S., the U.S. was always a place that we visited, right? It was never the place that we stayed. So it was really hard transitioning back to the U.S., knowing that we were going to be there for a while, because we ended up living there for a couple of years before we ended up moving here. So when we went back, I was put in school, and both my parents grew up in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So for them to understand TCKs has definitely been a hurdle to understand me and all my siblings. So I was at school, I was put into school, and the Sukuma way to do things is to try to be friends with everybody. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I was influenced a lot by my local culture. Okay. So I tried very hard to be friends with everyone. And there were a few people who, obviously, because in America, you normally aren't friends with everybody. You have your select group of friends, and you hang out with them. Mm-hmm. At the school I was going to, there were 3 people who I couldn't get along with, or just couldn't get along with me. I could normally bridge the gap, but they weren't able to. Okay. So that was weird coming back to the U.S., because I was like, nobody in my class will hang out with me. And my parents were like, what do you mean? Like, your entire class loves you. And I said, no, it's these 3 people. They can't hang out with me. They won't hang out with me, so they're trying to speak for the entire group, which is what it would be in Sukuma land, is you get along with some people, and there's 1 or 2 people who you don't get along with. And in Sukuma land, you get along with everyone, and you talk like you get along with everyone, even if you don't get along. Interesting, okay. Yeah. So, there have been other times just going back to the U.S. or even being here with friends where you'll be talking about something and I'll say it a certain way we have before. I'll go about it the Sukuma way, and people are like, "What's wrong with you? Is something wrong?" And then blend that together with being a TCK, and a lot of people just don't understand you.
Yeah, but then did you find anyone who did understand you?
There have been a couple of people.
Okay, good.
I've found a few TCK friends in the U.S. We went to a conference, and I was able to meet some friends there who they've been a big part of me sort of not more adjusting to American culture, because they were also in Africa as well. And I mean, not that Africa is entirely the same, but there were some things that we could relate upon.
That's good. It's good to find community that gets you and stuff like that. You shared a story about like a cross-cultural experience in America and culture shock. So what are some favorite stories you have of Tanzania, or whether it's with the people, your family, trying food, or like exploring? Yeah, what are some good stories of yours? Like,
I'd say one of my favorite memories, because we were in Tanzania, our family wasn't there with us.
Okay.
So we had, I don't know if you guys had this where you were located, but oftentimes where we were in Tanzania, because we were the foreigners, we needed to help provide jobs for people.
Okay.
And there was an older man who would help us. He worked in our house for a while, and then he ended up working outside and doing like gardening type work. And then eventually, when he got too old for that, we wanted to still help him and his family. So we had cows, and the Sukuma culture is very like cattle oriented as well. So he would watch the cows, which is like every older guy's dream is like to be able to sit underneath the tree, be able to talk with people, and have the cows be in their pasture there. So he, for me, was like a grandfather. Awesome. And there are a lot of great memories that I've had with him, and like all the stories that he told me, just traditional Tanzanian fables. Like in the West, we have Aesop's fables. In Sukuma land, we have a bunch of stories to do with King Tembo or King Elephant, and the warriors Simba and Lion, and then the mischief maker Rabbit, and others like that, other characters like that. That are sort of like an Aesop's fable, like that. And he would tell me a lot of those stories. He actually recently just passed, so it's harder to talk about that. Probably one of my like fun memories, we worked with an orphan care ministry.
That's cool.
So we lived on the same property as the orphanage with 50, 60 other kids there. And they were like siblings almost, or like cousins. You'd go over and you'd hang out with them, and we played soccer like 4 or 5 hours every day. But I can remember being 6 or 7, and the older boys, who at that time were around in their teens, they would go around and they'd collect sparrows.
Like the bird?
Like the bird. They would take a string, and they'd tie it to the sparrow's foot. And the idea is they walk around like it would be a balloon. And this is real. I can remember being 6 or 7 and really wanting a bird like that, like a balloon, and not being able to get one because I couldn't catch one. So they'd walk around with a string, holding on to 3 or 4 different strings with 3 or 4 different sparrows flying around.
Dang, that is like sad, but like so funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of the kids there, because Tanzania is very poverty stricken, they don't really have like toys that you can buy at a store, so they make a lot of their own toys,
which is
they
so
play
cool.
with, which is really cool. So I always grew up making cars that we drive around out of wire and old flip-flops. We'd cut the flip-flops into tires, and we'd use the wire, and we'd make steering mechanisms and stuff with like sticks and stuff like that. And we'd walk around for hours, or like have a wire car with like bottle cap wheels pulling it around behind us like a wagon. And really we just walk around for hours and play games with them. And
that's talk about like early engineering like skills.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Okay, so moving on to one of the more final questions. What is like, I guess like embarrassing you did, or like a funny / embarrassing story? I don't know, like traveling.
So are you thinking like a cool story or like an embarrassing story traveling?
You can do like a mix of both.
After we were in Tanzania for like 2.5 years, we went back to the States for our first time in the States for a little bit. And we were flying back to Minnesota through O'Hare Airport, which, for those of you who don't know, is a huge airport in Chicago. Annoyingly big. Yeah, it's bigger than it has to be, and there are many stories in that airport. That again. But I have a couple of memories from this, where we were walking, and there was a guy who would walk past with a bunch of balloons. This is before I learned about all the birds and everything. But he was walking past with a bunch of balloons. And I came to my mom, and I said, "Mom, I want a balloon." And she said, "No, I'm sorry. We need to make it to our gate," because we were running to our gate, pretty much. Because, like we said, it's annoyingly big. Yeah. You need a long time to get places in O'Hare Airport. So my parents kept going with my older sister, Grace, and they got halfway to our gate and realized I was not with them.
So you chased the balloon?
I chased after the balloon.
Dang.
And I still have a memory of seeing the man with the balloons and following him and then getting a talking to by my parents when they finally found me.
Oof, I bet that was like an awkward silence on the plane ride, just like birds chirping.
I mainly slept. Oh, okay. I mean, I might have screamed a bit too. And then I'd say probably one of the coolest stories in traveling was our family got to stay in the presidential suite in Doha.
That's so cool.
We were flying to a conference in Cyprus at the time, and we had talked to Qatar Airways, and they said they could get us a room in the airport hotel there. So we got to the hotel in Doha, which is also annoyingly big.
But it's good.
It's
fast.
It's very good, even though it's large. They designed it really well. But we got there, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, the airport hotel is full. We don't have," or they didn't have 2 rooms next to each other. Okay. Which me and my family, with 5 siblings and my 2 parents, wouldn't be able to fit into one apartment room, and we wanted to be next to each other. Okay. Since we were all like under 13 at the time. So they said, "Okay, there's a hotel outside of the airport that we can put you up in, and we'll pay for the night." And we said, "Okay, sure, whatever." So we got on a shuttle bus, and we got to the hotel, and they said, "Sorry, we don't have 2 rooms right next to each other."
Okay, so like...
And my dad said, "What do you mean? We were told we'd have a room. Or 2 next to each other, or well, no, it would be big enough to fit us all." And the guy leaned over the counter and said, "Okay, we do have 1 room that could fit you all."
Okay.
And my dad said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "I can't tell you about it, but trust me, it will fit you. Come with me." And we said, "Okay."
It's like so we got drug dealers.
So we got into, we got all of our bags and stuff, and we got into the elevator, and I can remember going up, I don't know how many flights it was, but I can remember seeing the numbers 70, 80, whatever, as we went higher and higher. And then it was a glass door. The elevator was glass. And then we went into concrete, and then it opened up into a hallway with doors on either side, and then one at the very end. And he said, "All right, walk down to the very end. That'll be your room." And my dad said, "Okay." So he brought all of us in, and we got to stay in the presidential suite that Barack Obama had been in 2 weeks before.
That's incredible. That is such a cool story. That is an amazing experience.
I turned 13 over the conference, so I was almost 13 at the time.
Okay, so you can remember it well.
I can remember it well. Okay. I specifically went and like sat at the head of the conference table and like asked my dad if I could have some tea, and then went and slept on the couches in the conference room.
That's
the rest of our family got to sleep in the like humongous beds. They shouldn't even be beds. They're like massive.
That's so cool. Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Jetlagged. I would like to give a shout out to Silas for coming on. Thank you for that. Also, no problem. Shout out to Elizabeth for writing the questions, and a special thank you to Kian, our producer and editor, who does so much for this podcast. Thank you. If you want to email us, ask us any questions, give suggestions for episodes we should do, you can reach us at jetlagpodcats@gmail.com. Again, that's jetlagpodcats@gmail.com. And again, thanks for listening.
See ya.